What's up YouTube and welcome to a new video. Now in the beginning of this year, Jaguar Landrover shared their fancy new strategy which they call reimagine. And there are especially petrol heads who need to reimagine a lot. Jaguar announced that it will be an all-electric brand by 2025, meaning that from 2025 onwards, Jaguar will only build all-electric cars. Naturally, this lines up with legislation and industry trends. Unfortunately for the F-type though, this means that it's pretty much ruled out that there will be a successor with a combustion engine. Yet, there also might be good news for F-type owners. It wouldn't be the first time that car values increased just because that particular car is the last of its kind. Look for example at the Ferrari 458. Those values are holding up wonderfully. To see if the same goes for F-type values, we will have a look at the value development during last year. We will also compare this development to some other cars, as that is the only way in which we can assess if there's some kind of the last of its kind effect. Yet, before we look at any of that, let's first have a look at today's market so we know what's what. Over here we have the US market at the end of September. You can see that we have the model year on the horizontal axis and the price on the vertical axis. Each car is displayed by a bubble and the colors show the different engine types. We have the 4-cylinder, the V6 and the V8. Now in total there are 625 cars for sale, and this is quite a significant number for this car type. The median price for the F-type is $60,000, but as you can see, this fluctuates a lot for each model year and engine type. The V8 has a median price of $70,000, the V6 of $52,000 and the 4-cylinder of $57,000. And this immediately shows one of the most important decisions which you need to make when you are shopping for an F-type: the engine. For around $50,000 you can find relatively fresh 4 and 6 cylinders, but if you are willing to go for an older car, then $50,000 can also get you into a V8. So how did these values develop during last year? Let's have a look. We start with the median price developments for the different engine types. We have now the date on the horizontal axis and the price on the vertical axis. And based on this picture, V8 prices remained more or less constant, V6s increased with 8% and the 4-cylinders decreased with 22%. And that is something which you don't see often these days. Basically all other cars went up in value. This picture over here is then also a tad misleading. First of all, some segments contain various model types and it might be so that the change in the market share for one of these model types affected the prices. In today's market we have for example quite a few P450s for sale. And this is a V8 model which is somewhat cheaper than the S, R and SVR. Second, there are some large fluctuations in the mileages. On January 2021, most of the 4-cylinders were new cars, while now the market is predominantly made up out of used cars. Consequently, the median mileage increased with 10,000 miles. If we adjust for this by looking at the mileage weighted prices, then we can see that the 4-cylinders and the V6s went up by 18%. And that is quite a decent score. In any case, my point over here is that we need to look a little bit deeper into these numbers before we can draw any conclusions. So let's do that and let's start with the 4-cylinder and then work our way up to the V8. But before we do so, if you like this video, please support the channel by clicking on the like button down below. Thank you. Alright, the 4-cylinder market. We already saw that the median price decreased by 22%, and this is mainly caused by the mileage increase. Yet, if you have a 4-cylinder F-type or are looking to purchase one, then you know that you can choose out of a few trim levels. So let's split the 4-cylinder market by some trim levels. You can see now that we have the first editions in green, the base models in blue and the checkered flag ones in orange. And for these I unfortunately don't have any historical data. Now then, this graph reveals that the price drop in the 4-cylinder market is mainly driven by the base models. Values in that market decreased by 25%, and this is a statistically significant drop. And this means that the drop is unlikely to be the result of chance. Contrary to this, the first editions kept their value pretty well. However, the difference in price development is easy to explain. If we look at the underlying market characteristics with this graph, we can see that the mileage increased tremendously in the 4-cylinder market. And the higher the mileage, the lower the price. The first edition market didn't change so much as it still consists mainly out of new cars. If we then go back to the previous graph and adjust the price development for the mileage, then we can see that the first editions went up with 10% and that the base models went up with 17%. And the difference between the two can probably be explained by the small market size for today's first edition market. To conclude, the 4-cylinder market saw a drastic change in the last 9 months. Mileages increased a lot and this had an influence on the price. However, adjusted for this, prices increased in line with the rest of the car market. Yet, I looked a bit deeper into the data and saw that this especially goes for cars with more than 10,000 miles. The lower the mileage, the lower the price increase. And with that, let's move on to the V6 market. Also in that market we need to consider a few important market segments. We have, for example, the normal V6, the V6S and the 400 Sport. For each of these it is possible to make a very detailed analysis and pinpoint which part of the market is driving the price change. However, since we are considering the complete F-type market in this video, we will only have a look at the high-level price changes. Let's start with the median price developments. Over here we have the V6S, the normal V6, the 400 Sport and the V6s for which I don't have any information. And the latter goes for the cars from 2018 till 2021. The data quality was too poor to assess if it concerned a P340 or a P380. So the newer V6s are all grouped together and receive the label no information. But now then, the price changes. We can see that there are some large differences. Base models saw an increase of 2.6%, S models a decrease of 5%, 400 Sports an increase of 13%, and the most recent V6s a drop of 31%. And these results are not really what I expected to find. But just as for the 4-cylinder market, there are some reasonable explanations for the differences. The recent V6 market saw, for example, a large shift. In January 2021, 75% of the market supply was for model year 2021 or 2020, while it is only 20% in today's market. And naturally, this means that the median mileage changed a lot. It increased with 20,000 miles. So you probably guess what we will do next. Have a look at the mileage adjusted price development. Alright, this already looks a bit better. Prices increased from top to bottom with 11, 16, 3 and 7%. Especially the increase in the 400 Sport and the recent V6s are in line with what I expected. Coincidentally or not, these are also the newest models. The older model saw a much smaller price change. The price increase of 3% in the V6S market isn't even statistically confirmed. But this of course doesn't mean that there are no V6S's out there which saw a much larger increase than this 3%. If we do a little deep dive and look at the mileage to price relationship, we can see that the orange line, which shows today's market, lays slightly above the blue one, the market of January 2021. And this is the same 3% increase which we saw before. However, you can clearly see that the market bottom increased in the past 9 months. There is no supply anymore for cars between 20 and 45,000 miles which are priced below $40,000. So if you happen to have purchased one of these cars, you are of course looking at a much larger price increase than the 3%. So to conclude this market segment, the V6s saw a mileage adjusted price increase of 18%, but there are extremely large differences within the sub-segments. Price increases are the largest for the most recent cars with a relatively high mileage and the smallest for the older cars. Yet, to complicate things further, we also saw that there can be large differences within each sub-segment. Let's have a look now at the V8 market segment and see if that market is a bit easier to analyze. And to speed things up a bit, we will immediately have a look at the mileage adjusted price changes. We can see now the price development for the SVR, the R and the S models, and this translates to increases of 11, 5 and 12%. Again, like we saw for the V6 market, there are some significant differences between them. The clear outlier over here is the R market, but like we've seen before, there can be big differences within a sub-segment, and that is also what's going on here. Cars with more than 10,000 miles saw a larger increase than the cars with less than 10,000 miles. Also, like we saw in the V6 market, we can see a clear increase in the market bottom, not so much a complete market shift. And this in turn means that if you got a good deal before, you might be looking at an increase which is much larger than the 5%. And after all of those graphs and numbers, I think it is time that we do a little summary. We investigated the price changes for the different engine types, and this reveals that the F-type market is a tricky one to analyze. Market composition changed a lot during the last year, and the differences between the market segments can be large. If we stick to the aggregates, we saw that it are the V6s and the 4-cylinders which saw the largest mileage adjusted price increases. Prices increased with 18 and 17%. For the V6s, this increase mainly comes from the more recent examples and the 400 Sports, while the 4-cylinder market saw a shift for all models. Surprisingly, the V8 market saw with a 5% increase the smallest increase. Most of the increases over here come from the SVR and the S models. And this is interesting, right? If we relate this back to the original question of the video, how are values impacted by the move to an all-electric brand, one could expect that there would be a significant impact on the V8 models. These represent the pinnacle of the F-type and therefore should have seen the largest increase. At least, that's one way to look at it. But how do you see this? Are you surprised by these results, or are they what you expected? Some say that the V6 might be the best F-type to go for. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Now, we saw that prices increased, but this doesn't answer the video's question. After all, most cars saw a very large price increase during last year. If F-type values were positively impacted by a move to all-electric vehicles, it's reasonable to expect that between January and now, values increased more than for its competition. And when we speak about F-type competitors, we can't omit the Porsche family. Let's first compare the 4-cylinder F-type to the 718 Cayman and then the V6 and V8 models to the 911. Over here we have now the mileage adjusted price development of the Caymans and the 4-cylinder F-type. You can see that I don't have the exact same dates, so we will use the one for the F-types as a reference. If I insert the percentage increases in the graph, you can see that the 4-cylinders went up as much as the Caymans did. And to be honest, that's quite an impressive result. Even in these times when car values are soaring, not many cars can keep up with the Porsche family. Let's have a look now at the comparison between the V6 and the V8 market and the Porsche 911, 991 Carrera and Carrera S market. If I again insert the price increases for the period between January and roughly September, we can see that the V6s did better than the Carreras. There's a gap of 5 percentage points between them. Who would have thought that? Yet, the V8s lag behind the Carreras. But remember that this is caused by the R models. The S and SPR saw an increase of 11 and 12%, and this is in line with the increase in the Carrera market. On an aggregate level, so all of the F-types combined, the market saw an increase of 14%. And compared to all of the other cars that you analyzed on the channel, this means that the F-type ranks somewhere in the top tier of the middle segment. And with that, let's wrap up and conclude. Following a move to all electric vehicles, can we see a last of its kind effect in the F-type market? Objectively speaking, not really. The price increase in the F-type market certainly ranks more towards the top than towards the bottom, but it's no outlier. We've seen other cars going up with 14%. Also, I think that it is surprising that the increase is driven by the V6s and the 4-cylinders. This doesn't fit with a narrative where the pinnacle of the F-types, so the V8s, would increase in value because it's the last of its kind. It fits more with a narrative where demand is simply the highest for the 4-cylinders and the V6s. I couldn't find the source for this anymore, but I believe that the majority of F-type sales were indeed 4-cylinders. On top of this comes that Jaguar announced to stop production for the 4 and 6-cylinders, something which will drastically limit supply in those markets. Personally though, I was expecting a much smaller price increase in the F-type market. The market is notorious for its depreciation, and we've seen that it is not self-evident that these markets benefit from the upward trend in used car prices. And with that we arrive at the end of the video. Now it was quite a long video with a lot of numbers and graphs, but I hope it was informative for you. If you like this data-driven approach of analyzing car markets but would have liked to see the analysis for a different car, please let me know down below in the comment section for which car you would like to see an analysis. Also don't forget to subscribe and click on the notification bell so you get actually notified when your requested analysis goes live. As always, thank you for watching and I hope to see you next week for a new video.